Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
Coming up on the Unscripted Ohio podcast for September the 10th, former Ohio State football captain and offensive lineman Kirk Barton joins me to co-host the Unscripted Ohio podcast today with a little help from BuckeyeGrove.com analyst Ross Fulton. We dissect what happened on Saturday against Rutgers in the 52-3 victory for the Buckeyes, as well as a look ahead to the big clash with TCU on Saturday. All coming up next on Unscripted Ohio.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to BuckeyeGrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
Good Monday, everybody. Welcome back to the Unscripted Ohio podcast presented by BuckeyeGrove.com. I'm your host, Kyle Lamb, and I am with co-host Kirk Barton, who is back with BuckeyeGrove.com this week, and I'm very excited to have him along with me. Kirk, thank you for being back, and I know it's been a long couple of months for you, but I'm glad everything is okay, and we're here to have some fun now. How about that?
It sounds great, man. It's good to be back on the Grove. It's good to kind of see all my old friends, especially Tex and Buckeye and Nevada and Nooner and all those guys. So it's been great to be back.
So, what are your thoughts on Ohio State? They're 2-0, looking very, very good, albeit against questionable competition so far. But I think the Buckeyes offensively have exceeded any expectations anybody had for them. Defensively, first game was a little rough. Second game was much, much better. What are your overall observations for the Buckeyes to start the season?
I think it's as good of a start as you could have asked for. Namely, they've been relatively injury-free. They obviously losing Brandon Bone for the year is tough, but they kind of knew they weren't going to have him just based on his previous surgeries, and but just having Dwayne command the offense, seeing our skill guys play so unselfishly. You can tell that they all root for each other. They're all sharing touches. The two running backs have been phenomenal, and it's a big credit to Coach Meyer and Mark Pantoni, because the way they accumulate talent and then they get the talent to buy in and not be selfish, about who's getting touches, who's scoring touchdowns, whatever. And it's just something I'm enjoying. I always tell people to enjoy this while it lasts, because all this stuff's always circular to me, and you look at how Michigan is and other schools around the country, and I'm enjoying this run right now.
Kirk Barton, obviously, for those listening, if you're a little younger and you didn't get to watch the Buckeyes in the 2000s, of course, Kirk, former offensive lineman and captain of Ohio State. Kirk, I know Dwayne Haskins isn't a captain, but being a quarterback, obviously, he's got to have a lot of leadership skills and take command of the offense. How would you assess Dwayne Haskins so far in that leadership role as starting quarterback for the Buckeyes?
Well, he's obviously been excellent. Just how he's carried himself, how he's he waited his turn, he redshirted. There's some kids that when they're heralded, once they are told they're redshirting, then they look around, start snooping around, transferring, and Dwayne's been he's been phenomenal. And when you're the biggest thing that no one ever talks about with leadership is that, the best way to lead is to perform at a really high level. It's easy to go and yell and be rah-rah, but if you go out and you're not performing, it doesn't matter. No one's going to listen to you anyways. But Dwayne's been fantastic. He's probably top 2 on most Heisman ballots at this point, and I hope it continues, and I think that it will.
So Ross Fulton will be with us here in a few minutes, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the Rutgers game and break down some of the things we saw and look ahead a little more to TCU. But I want to talk big picture right now. How realistic of expectations that Ohio State fans have as we're 2 games into the season? We know from the Iowa City debacle last year that things can turn on a dime. You can be all jazzed up on this big comeback win against Penn State. Next thing you know, you go to Iowa City and all hell breaks loose. So we know from past experiences, you got to temper expectations and take it one game at a time. But fans can obviously look ahead a little bit. How jazzed do you think Ohio State fans should be about this team from where we're at through 2 games in 2018?
Well, it's one of those things where I think obviously they should expect to win a national championship just based on the talent level, and our schedule is moderately favorable. Going to Beaver Stadium, Penn State is going to be by far our biggest challenge of the year. But at the end of the year, we got Michigan State on the road. We got Michigan. I'm sure we'll probably see Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. So, but I just feel like we're to the point now, talent-wise, where we're better than everybody we play. So, as long as our guys can stay locked in and focus, and frankly, a lot of these guys are playing for contracts next year in the NFL. I always call their contract year because, there's a lot of talk about Dwayne going pro. There's a lot of our receivers are, either seniors or juniors that could go pro. Running backs that are, Mike Weber's probably going to be taken off. I mean, it's one of those things where I think that makes kids focus a little bit more because, they're off to a hot start and, and they've got the confidence that they can do it. And, until they see Clemson or Bama, they're going to be just physically better than everybody they play.
Yeah, and I don't want this to sound like a hot take, but man, it's like you see some of those preseason predictions of people like doing mental gymnastics to find ways to not pick Ohio State to win the East. And I think to some degree, that's what some of these people were doing. They were just looking to be trendy and find some kind of, out of left field pick. But when you watch the talent level through 2 games so far, I mean, Michigan State has been a big disappointment. They struggled against Utah State and then lost out there in Tempe to Arizona State. Michigan, obviously, their offensive problems have not gone away. They looked a little better against Western Michigan, obviously, but against Notre Dame, they were terrible. Penn State, I thought, looked very good against Pitt. But you just compare the talent level from Ohio State to these teams, and I think Greg McElroy said it best on the broadcast of Michigan State, Arizona State on Saturday. You're looking at this Ohio State team right now, and you're thinking maybe it's going to take Ohio State to just not show up and play their game and really, hurt themselves for somebody to beat them. And I don't want to say that they're unbeatable, but it might take that kind of performance from Ohio State for some of these teams to beat them, at least just based on talent from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, that's, kind of what makes Urban Meyer and makes, Nick Saban is that you have to rein these kids in from the fan bases because the fan bases, like our fan base through 2 games is they're ready to retire Dwayne Haskins' number and, get just already built him, the life-size Heisman replica. And which is great, because that means that he's playing well and he's earned it. But at the same focus, man, these kids, they got to stay locked in because, as we saw like with Iowa City last year, like that team had no business beating us. But, when you show up to an environment, and I was nervous about going into that game because none of our players had ever been to Kinnick. And, a lot of these kids, they look and they say, oh, well, our roster is 100% 4 and 5 star kids, and Iowa's is 3 and 2 star and like 2 4-star kids. And, they never saw any of these kids at like the Army All-American Bowl or, any of these big time, the opening like that. It's just Iowa takes these roughneck, tough kids and they mold them into really, sound, technical, good football players that physically aren't as good as we are. But, if we don't show up, they can make us look really bad, which they did. And that's the thing that we're going to have to fight with as the season goes on. Because after TCU, like, we're going to get on a little roll and, you get through Penn State and then it's like, get to Michigan State, then get to Michigan. I mean, it's going to be tough, because we don't have that. There isn't like a juggernaut on the schedule where we're like, oh God, we got to get through that because, Penn State is going to be very tough, but I think that physically we're just much better than they are.
And you and Ross and I will talk about this later, the TCU game itself, but even that is going to be interesting because, they're not going into this hostile environment that you might see at a Wisconsin or like you mentioned, Penn State. They do have Penn State on the schedule this year. They're not going to see that this weekend in Arlington. But you go into Jerry World and it's going to be, this huge stadium that's just like bigger than life. And it's going to be a nationally televised primetime game. So there is going to be a big stage for this game. And even if Ohio State is favored by, I think the opening line, 12.5 points, it's going to be interesting to see how some of these guys fare on this big stage, Dwayne Haskins included. But, there are some other young guys that are going to be getting their first taste of action in this setting. So, what are your expectations for how a team might handle that sort of setting?
Well, I mean, I think it always helps to lean on your running game, lean on your defense. Again, as I've said many times, our defense will travel well. Obviously we got to make a few adjustments, but having our front seven and the people and the talent that we have, like it makes it a lot easier to go on the road. And frankly, having a big, strong, tough offensive line that can just lean on their front and wear them out as we run tight zone with Mike Weber and with J.K. Dobbins, and we run, our horizontal game with Paris Campbell. Like those are the kind of things that can really suck the energy out of a opponent on a big stage. Is just keep pounding them and then hit them with a shot over the top. And the way Dwayne throws the deep ball is just it's like art watching it. When a guy's got a step, I mean he puts it right on the hands, and it's something that the great thing about playing at Cowboy Stadium is it's climate control. You have to worry about it raining or, we've played in the rain, the last 2 weeks, damp fields, bad conditions. Like we're going to be on a fast track, with a roof, climate controlled. And I think our offense is going to explode again.
It's amazing to see. You mentioned Weber and Dobbins running the ball. It's really amazing to see them because you can see them feeding off of each other right now. It's like Dobbins was running so hungry on Saturday. It's almost like he took it personal that Weber looked so good in the first week. And, he didn't look bad by any means, but, he ran for a modest 5 yards to carry. And then he comes back on Saturday, and he didn't break the big one necessarily, but he was running so hard. And it just feels like that the competition has really helped the both of them.
Yeah, and I think you even see that, later in games. Like I said it till the last snap, the last two games, because I like watching, Master Teague, and I like watching these young guys feed off each other too, because it kind of sets a good precedent that we're not like a crew that just has like one workhorse, So in recruiting, if you're a young freshman and you're a stud, there's no reason you can't beat out Mike Weber. There's no reason you can't come in and beat out JK. Like Urban's going to play the best guys, and and we got these young running backs that are helping out on special teams, and they're getting their touches late in the game, and they're getting in the end zone, and it's a real good culture for that that Tony Orford's got going in the running backs room right now, because it just helps in recruiting when you see every young guy getting touches late in games, salting the game away.
Ross Fulton is here with his whiteboard to break down what the Buckeyes and their opponents are doing on the field. Can't see the whiteboard? Close your eyes and imagine really hard. It's time to go inside the X's and O's with Ross.
Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
Serenity now!
All right, we are joined now by Ross Bolton, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of some real geeky talk now. I'm just going to kind of run the show, and I'll let Ross and Kirk do all the real talking. But Ross, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Good to talk to you guys.
So let's start. Your overall impressions. Let's start with the defense. Actually, obviously a difference of night and day. No pun intended. With the Scarlet Knights, but night and day for Ohio State defense playing against Rutgers. What was your impressions and takeaways from some of the concerns we saw against Oregon State versus what we saw against Rutgers on Saturday?
Yeah, I'd say my top line takeaway was how important Jordan Fuller is. Between a combination of his talent level and also just, the relative dearth of players behind him. There were a couple situations on Saturday that, to me, were reminiscent of runs where I saw against Oregon State, except the difference was rather than a safety sort of tiptoeing up and not maintaining his leverage and angles, Fuller came in and made the tackle, and, it's 2nd and 7, and no one really notices that play until it breaks. So, I thought everyone had better – I thought all the players did a better job in terms of pursuit and contain responsibilities, but it really underscored his importance.
Kirk, one of the interesting things for me, I saw this. You could tell this was a point of emphasis during the week. I saw this play, I want to say it was in the second quarter, where Robert Landers made this incredible spin move and beat his guy, and he beat his man so easily. Like all of a sudden, he stopped and he realized, screen pass, because he was thinking he got in there too easily, and then he retreated back. It turns out it wasn't actually a screen pass, but he made such an incredible move. And Robert Landers, by the way, was just absolutely insane on Saturday. But it was kind of funny because you could tell from that play alone that they had been drilled all week long to recognize that screen pass.
Yeah, I think it's the thing that they're going to get drilled on just the rest of the year, because when you have Nick and Chase on the edge, and you have our interior guys that can rush the passer. The only thing you can really do to slow that down is you have to have a pretty solid screen game. The thing is with with the pressure they're seeing and the fact that you can't double team both edges. I mean, that's something that Larry Johnson's always been good about in terms of drilling the retracing your steps and pursuing down the line on a screen pass. And I think that we got beat on a few chunk plays the week before, and I'm sure they drilled that. And the kids are just trying to do the right thing, as in BB. And it was something that I'm sure we're going to see this week against TCU and probably for the rest of the season. But it's a product of having probably, in my opinion, the best pass rush in college football. I mean, it's going to be one of those deals that we're just going to deal with.
Ross, you mentioned Jordan Fuller. He made an obvious impact on the game. Just seeing his presence in there, both leadership as well as actual physical play. But man, Shaun Wade was absolutely amazing as well. What are you thinking of his role going forward?
Yeah, I mean, he's got the length to play and the size to play in there. I mean, they used him obviously in nickel. I could see him playing safety. I thought that with Fuller at the field safety, they had Pryor and went rotate at the boundary safety, and they were fine. But I would only expect Shaun Wade's role to grow. And I think that as long as the back seven can limit those kind of explosive plays, to you and Kirk's earlier discussion, the more passing downs that they can get teams in, the better off they're going to be, because as you guys were just discussing, the defensive line is pretty dominant. And Nick Bosa in particular, at this point, basically has no business playing on Saturdays.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
I mean, I know this seems like an obvious thing to say, but I mean, he's the best player in college football right now, right? I mean, it doesn't even seem close to me, and I don't even think that's being a homer or partisan. He has the awe factor when you watch him.
Yeah, I mean, between his hands, his effort, his technique, his array of moves, his power. I mean, it's just silly watching. I always feel bad for. I usually watch the tackles on every snap, and it's just like I can tell right away, they're nervous and they can't get a clean vertical set because they're just so worried about his speed and they don't bull rush him. And it's just, I mean, I'm just enjoying watching the last few games of Nick's career.
And the thing I appreciate about him too is how well he plays the run as well as the pass. He's not one of those guys who's just solely looking, to rush the passer. I mean, when he needs to close down on a pulling guard, he does it.
On the offensive side of the ball, Ross, I know you've been talking about, for really since August, since we started talking, you've been curious about how the left tackle would do, and it's only 2 games. It's only Oregon State, Rutgers. Although the Rutgers defense was a step up from what we saw against Oregon State, but they're still, they're not going to be a Michigan or a Wisconsin. But Thayer Munford so far through 2 games, I would say easily an A grade, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear Kirk's thoughts on more detail on him, but yeah, I mean, obviously he's been probably the most pleasant surprise between, being a brand new starter. Then in camp he was injured off and on, and obviously the importance of left tackle. It's been largely a clean pocket. I mean, Dwayne Haskins has a nice ability to step up in the pocket, but nevertheless, I think it's been impressive both in the run and the pass game.
Yeah, I agree. There's only really one moment that stood out with there where they didn't look too smooth on a twist. They both kind of got beat on the left, but he's a second-year player, and it's I expect some hiccups as it gets a little bit tougher. A la Isaiah Prince, who's likely going to be a top 3-round draft pick, but Thayer's he's one of those reasons why I always get excited about kids when they actually get to campus, because he was one of the lower rated guys that we've had in Urban's era, and he surpassed a few kids that were more highly rated, more highly touted, that fans were more excited about. And the kid's worked hard. I mean, he's dropped 50 pounds since he committed, and he's been a grinder in the weight room. And that's really all you can do when you're a young kid like that who's trying to make his mark. And it's all going to come with him. It's all going to come down to pass protection and handling the noise, especially, when they go to Happy Valley and, Michigan State, and, and then, by the end of the year, he's got Rashawn Gary, which is going to be, that'll be a biggie, but, he gets to go against Nick and Chase every day in practice, which is honestly the best thing in the world for him because, you got to figure out a way to block those guys, and blocking those guys generally is, much harder than what he goes against on Saturday. And I'm just happy for the kid. I mean, I know he's come a long way and he's been through a lot, and, he's been consistent, and he's going to be really the key to the entire offense this year, in my opinion, because if he can have just a solid year, then, I mean, the offense will maintain this explosion that we've been just enjoying.
Kirk, you mentioned handling calls. I'm curious also your opinion on Michael Jordan. Ross and I have talked about him. Obviously, he's a little unconventional because of his size for center, but he's, so far handled it really well, and I'm curious how he does on the road in those environments you mentioned when he has to handle the calls and everything and be a little more forceful. What have you seen from Michael Jordan so far, and how do you handicap what you expect from him going forward?
I mean, I can't imagine that there's someone who's above him in the Remington race so far, just given our offensive output. But I think Mike is a really sharp kid, a bright kid. I think he's a first-round pick after this year, just because of his versatility of being able to play literally all 5 spots on the O-line. And, he's a bigger center, but, if you watch the Clemson A&M game, I mean, you know why we need a bigger center. I mean, you watch Dexter Lawrence, and then you watch Raekwon Davis at Alabama, and it's like you need, a pretty stout interior to be able to hang in there against these bigger nose and G techniques that we're going to see if we want to go where we want to go, which is, in the playoffs through the major teams. But, the offense isn't overly complicated. I always would joke that, I mean, some of the guys that, Coach Myers had to coach in the past, weren't exactly neurosurgeons, so you can't make the offensive line calls some ancient Sanskrit. I mean, you got to make it something pretty simple that guys can pick up. And I think Mike's done a great job of that. I mean, it's, once you know guard, you pretty much know the calls that you need at center. And, he's the leader of the room now. He's the guy that's got the most experience, and he's played the best, and he's got the most credentials, being all Big Ten. And I'm just really thrilled with him. And I think that, Malcolm Pridgeon stepping up is great, and obviously Thayer's kind of he's the key to the whole deal, playing left tackle.
Ross, I want to get into Haskins here in a minute because there are some other conversations I think we should have that I think will be fun, and I think we're all on the same page, but maybe not everybody listening will be. We'll get into that in a second, but one of the byproducts of the line playing so well, giving Haskins so much protection, is Haskins has like 4 or 5 seconds back there to throw most of these plays, sometimes 6 seconds, which is just an incredible amount of time, and obviously that's going to change as the year goes on. But he also has receivers getting really wide open. Now, I know, we can sit here and issue all the caveats about the competition that Ohio State is facing right now, but is it safe to say that this is I mean, at least I'm going to make this opinion. I don't know if you agree with me or not. Maybe the deepest receiving core Ohio State has had on the field at the same time in any given year, because there's at any number of times throughout the game we've seen 4, 5, 6 guys consistently getting open. Competition aside, that's a really good omen, I think. What do you think, Russ?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in recent memory, I don't know if any one of them is the level of Mike Thomas. Obviously, when you put him with Devin Smith together, that was a pretty good 1-2 punch. But this group has the guys that really complement themselves and fit the X, Z, and H positions well. You have the 2 H's and Campbell and Hill, where Campbell's more of the guy you want to get the ball to in space. Hill's a sort of third down possession receiver. Austin Mack similarly at the X, which is a guy you want to be working single routes to the backside. And then your Z's in this offense tend to be your guys that you're trying to go over the top to, and both Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon have done that in the first couple, or made big plays in the first couple of games. So it's a pretty well-rounded group with a lot of experience.
And Kirk, I don't want to. I'm not here to throw dirt on Zach Smith, because it's really hard sometimes to parse receivers' output and what impact that has to do from coaching. So I'm not saying Zach Smith was the reason that the receivers are suddenly playing well. They might have done that against with Zach Smith in there, but it does seem like, and you've been around Brian Hartline. Tell us about Hartline and what you know of him as a person and as a coach, and what impact is he having on that group right now?
Well, I think Brian, obviously he's excellent technically, just from playing the position as well as he did for as long as he did in the National Football League. I think that he knows intricacies that, people that play the position, that get good at a position, they figure out tricks, they learn tricks, they're around pros, they're around people that, around good offensive coordinators in the NFL, or in my case, I had good offensive line coaches in the NFL, and you learn little things that you can pass on to kids that are seniors that are really polishing their game, for the next level. And, I think that, Zach deserves credit for recruiting a lot of these kids. And I think Brian walked into a very favorable situation just due to the sheer talent of the room that he inherited. Because, I was on staff in 2011 when we had, a freshman, Braxton Miller, and our receivers were Verlon Reed, who was a freshman, and Philly Brown, who was a sophomore, and Evan Smith, who was a freshman. And it's a lot harder to take over that room with, a freshman quarterback who, is learning the offense than it is to walk in, when you've got a veteran line to probably two of the top three backs in the Big Ten. The amount of talent and the amount of infrastructure that Coach Meyer has built at Ohio State has really made this a much easier transition for both Brian and even Ryan Day, as he's been the interim for the first 3 games, because the thing's on rails now. So it's been I think a much easier deal for both of them.
I'm curious your take on this, Kirk, because I've been saying I kind of expect when Urban gets back. I mean, he has his tendencies, and they're not right or they're not wrong necessarily. It's just his own tendencies. I've been thinking that maybe Urban would get back and have his own opinions on certain play calls and stuff. But with the offense flowing the way it is, how do you expect Urban to handle that when he gets back into the flow after next week? Do you see him changing, or do you see him letting the flow of the offense continue with what Kevin and Ryan have established in his absence?
I think, he'll have some input, but, the thing about Coach Myers, he's never been a play caller before at any level. So, I don't think that the play calling, like, he might, request a few things, but it's not like he's going to be running Dwayne Haskins. It's like when he went from, Tim Tebow to John Brantley. Like, you couldn't run John Brantley the same way that he ran Tim Tebow. I mean, it's just one of those things where he's adapting to his strengths, and obviously Dwayne has, a number 1 overall pick caliber arm, and that's, what they're utilizing. Like, I mean, even towards, the end of his run against Rutgers, I mean, they're in 5 wide and they're throwing it all over the lot. I mean, they're sticking to what his strength is, and you're utilizing these receivers. And I think that that's what we're going to continue to see. Like, this is our new offense for this year. I mean, he's really good at adapting to his talent, and, we're rolling 2 running backs and we're spread out. And I think that he's not going to tinker too much with it just because we've had so much success so far.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, I have to weigh in on this one, 'cause I'm like, I see this everywhere, and it's a personal pet peeve. I mean, I think it's so overblown that, like, people think Meyer's going to come back and he's going to demand that Dwayne Haskins run QB power 15 times a game. I mean, the guy's a very good coach for a reason. As Kirk says, I mean, he adapts. If JT Barrett's your quarterback, you're going to do what JT Barrett does well, which is the read option game and running him in short yardage situations. And I think that's what they did. And, they won a lot of games that way. And similarly, you're going to do what your current personnel does the best.
No, this is a good segue into what I want to get into. And I agree with what you said, Ross. It's not like Urban's going to come back, and they're not going to have 20 designed runs a game for Dwayne Haskins when he gets back. That's just not going to happen. They understand his strengths, and we know that is a passer and not a runner. But there will be a time and some space for quarterback draws when the situation dictates. And it's amazing because I had these debates on Twitter over the weekend. There's still a lot of people that they're just so I don't even know the right word for it, but it's like they've been captured by the quarterback draw for the last 3 years under JT Barrett. They're so afraid of it and terrified of it. And some people would just as soon never see another quarterback draw in the offense again. We're going to see it occasionally, and that's okay. But Ross, I'm curious, why do you think people are so terrified of the quarterback draw now?
It's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's just a little bit of. I think most fans, frankly, like to see the passing game and see the ball thrown around, and so I think that's a little bit of a reaction to that. And there's just a little bit of probably just people were like anything else. People like the new thing, and they've seen it a lot, and so they're done with it. But yeah, it's a part of this offense. You can't run a spread system and reequate numbers without having tendencies unless you occasionally use the quarterback in the run game. I mean, they're doing a lot of things to the first couple of weeks to minimize the quarterback's role in the run game, but I don't think it's going to ever completely go away as long as you're running this style of offense.
Yeah, and Kirk, you and I were talking about this earlier before we went on the air. There is a time, there is a place for somebody like Tate Martell, especially. You're going to run him more than you're going to run Dwayne Haskins because that's part of his skill set, and we've already seen glimpses of Tate Martell that he can run, and he took a big hit, sat out a play on Saturday and then bounced right back in, and it was a scary moment, but he was fine and got back in there, and I think he's a tough kid that can take those hits, and maybe you don't want to expose Dwayne Haskins to that type of physicality, but if you're going to run, like Ross just said, if you're going to run a spread system, there is a time when you've got numbers and you're going to want to run a quarterback draw on a 3rd and 3. It's just there are times for that, and Kirk, I'm curious what kind of balance you would expect to see with Ohio State running going forward, because we know it's going to happen at some point.
You mean specifically running the quarterback?
Yeah, running the quarterback. Yeah, draw or any time of maybe run pass option.
I think that the reason that fans kind of had this PTSD with the running game is because they think of the bad moments where it hasn't worked. They go back to the Virginia Tech game versus the Bear defense, or they go back to Michigan State in 2015 in the rain, or whatever given thing that they think, or the 2013 where we didn't convert against Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game, ran a Q run and didn't convert. And I think that they just have this thing where in their mind they just cling to the negative things that don't work, and they forget about how often it bails us out, or it does work, or we do convert, or we do score a touchdown. But I don't think it's going to be a real heavy part of Dwayne Haskins' repertoire, just because he's not very fast. I mean, he's not very elusive. Like, he's not. If Dwayne could run like Tate Martell, I mean, he'd probably he'd probably sit out the entire year and go #1 overall pick. But it's like, if he could run, then I think it'd be a much more favorable thing to do. But when we had a guy like Braxton Miller, who was kind of, we kind of forced him to be a quarterback. You got to run that guy, because he would get these chunk plays that we couldn't create in 2012. Just frankly, we weren't good enough. We weren't skilled enough. JT, who's, kind of, an average arm. And then, but you add his legs into the equation and he's, the Big Ten MVP. So it's like, they're good at using what they have, but I can't imagine them just pounding Dwayne Haskins the way they have JT and Braxton, or even like a Tim Tebow. Like, Tim Tebow was the 1st overall pick because his numbers were gaudy, but most executives realized he couldn't throw the football, but he could run it and he could move the offense down the field. But to me, it's going to be one of those things where I'd be shocked if it became a big staple this year, especially given having Mike Weber and JK and Paris coming across on jet sweeps. Like, there's so many options we have to run the ball now that it's it's just a little bit different than it was in the past.
Before we wrap the show up, I want to spend here a minute or two on the upcoming game, TCU, Ohio State. As I mentioned earlier in the show, opening up a 12.5-point favorite. Ross, what did you, I know we don't know a lot about this TCU team yet. They didn't play anybody. I mean, Ohio State played Oregon State and Rutgers, but TCU played Southern and SMU. So we really don't know much about TCU right now. But I have this feeling, I don't know, and it's not so much, I'm not jumping the gun and saying Ohio State's going to win a national championship or anything like that, but I have this feeling Ohio State may actually blitz TCU on Saturday. That's just a hunch. I could be way off on that, but Ross, I'll start with you. I'm curious your expectations for the Saturday game and what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, Gary Patterson obviously has made his name as a defensive coach with his 4-2-5 quarters-esque scheme that he's used for a long time. But, I actually could see it being a relatively high-scoring game. I think Ohio State's offense is difficult to stop. I also think, it's a little too premature for me to say that Ohio State's defense doesn't still remain susceptible to explosive plays in the back end. And I think TCU's quarterback, going back to our previous discussion, is a good, big, strong runner who could pick up some chunk plays. So, I guess if anything, I would see it maybe leaning towards the higher side. But, I don't think the spread is unreasonable.
Yeah, and Kirk, this TCU team does seem to be, they're very good with the screen passes, the outlet passes, the short routes. That is something that they've really had a hallmark for doing the last few years. So it will be probably a good test for Ohio State defense to see where they've come against a team that I think, maybe not as explosive offensively, but definitely well-skilled, disciplined, and a good all-around offense to face, I think, for this situation.
Yeah, and I think that, part of the reason I feel like we've given up some of these chunk plays is because, we've played two teams where we've been favored by, 5 touchdowns in a row. And it's, they've been, one was 3:30, one was at noon, but they're both in the rain. And, there's not a lot of excitement for it. But, when you're playing, prime time at Cowboy Stadium and that, every NFL scout in the world is watching, I feel like the guys are going to be a little sharper just because – naturally, when you're playing in that kind of environment and it's a packed house and it's basically a road game for us, obviously. And I think that, we'll be, our guys are going to be ready. They'll fix some things. And, at the end of the day, your pass rush always travels really well. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, with our defensive line, I never get too nervous about things because if you can affect the quarterback and you can disrupt their running game with our guys in the interior and with our guys setting the edge, it just makes me always sleep good at night when I know that we've got Chase and Nick Bosa because, frankly, I watched Clemson and I wouldn't take their guys over Chase and Nick, but that's just me on the edges. Now Dexter Lawrence is a different story, but otherwise, I'm just saying I feel real good about Saturday.
Yeah, that Clemson team gave up almost 600 yards, I think, to Texas A&M. It was not a good defensive performance for the Tigers. So. Ross, I'm going to put you on the spot. I did it last week. Care to offer up a prediction for the game Saturday?
No, man. This is always difficult. How about
It's preliminary. You have a week to change your official prediction on the site, but just for right now.
How about 45-28 Ohio State?
Kirk, what you saying?
I was literally going to say 42-28 just because I can't go too low when I know that how many points Oregon State scored, but it's one of those things where I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I think I'm kind of leaning 42-21, 38-17, something like that. Kind of thinking 3 touchdowns, but we'll see. I have a whole week to change my mind on that. So I really appreciated this. This was a lot of fun. Glad we were able to do this, and hopefully we'll be able to do this more. Kirk went out, got himself a microphone, so this will be a lot of fun going forward.
Yes, sir.
It was well worth the time and effort. Friday, I want to tell everybody we will have Billy Wessels, the publisher of PurpleMenace.com, will be joining us on Friday. We'll preview TCU, and we'll probably have a national expert on as well. I'm working on getting that lined up. So plenty to talk about on Friday, but Kirk and Ross, you can catch these guys on BuckeyeGrove.com, and very much appreciate both of you coming on.
Thank you, my man.
Happy to do it. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Kirk.
So you can catch the Unscripted Ohio podcast on BuckeyeGrove.com on Mondays and Fridays. Catch us on the archives. Search, find, subscribe, and follow on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. Catch me again on Friday.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.